We were hunters and foragers. The frontier was everywhere. We were bounded only by the earth and the ocean and the sky. The open road still softly calls, like a nearly forgotten song of childhood. Despite our limitations and fallibilities, we humans are capable of greatness. How far will our nomadic species have wandered by the end of the next century and the next millennium? Who will we become in the far future?
Well, let's just start by saying, wow. Hello and welcome to the Visual Effects Society's webcast series, VFX Pros Home Edition, delivering exclusive interviews and dynamic content. VFX Pros Home Edition is your channel for VFX stories behind the scenes, live conversations about cutting-edge technologies and techniques, discussions around the VES 70 most influential visual effects films, and more. We're so delighted that you're joining us for today's interactive discussion inside the VFX of National Geographic's Cosmos Possible Worlds with award-winning visual effects supervisor Jeffrey A. Okun, VES. We'll begin in just a minute. I'm Naomi Goldman, VES Communications Director. As your moderator, let me just share a few details. The webcast will run about an hour. It is being recorded and it will be available later on the VES website and on our social media channels, and we'll post the details at the end of the session. If you're on Zoom and you'd like to ask Jeff a question, just go to that Q&A toolbar at the bottom of your screen and type in your question. And if you're on Facebook Live, enter your question as a comment. We can't promise we'll get to all of them, but we'll do our best. Now, let me just tell you a little bit about our guest and then we'll jump in. Jeff Okun is a VES Fellow and a recipient of the VES Founders Award and served as the VES Board Chair for 7 years. He's known for creating organic and invisible effects, as well as spectacular tentpole visual effects, and has won the VES Award for Outstanding Supporting Visual Effects for his work on The Last Samurai. He's also delivered wide-ranging effects in award-winning films, such as Alpha, Blood Diamond, Stargate, Sphere, Red Planet, Deep Blue Sea, and The Last Starfighter. And lastly, Jeff also created and co-edited the VES Handbook of Visual Effects, an award-winning VFX reference book, whose 3rd edition will be published this summer. Hi, Jeff. Let's dive in. How are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
Awesome. So this is exciting to talk about this season's 13 episodes of Cosmos, this wildly successful science documentary TV series hosted by Neil deGrasse Tyson. So we're talking to you today. We just celebrated the 50th observance of Earth Day yesterday, and we're in this, important marker about protecting our planet. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about what's the aim of Cosmos and what it's trying to do in showcasing and engaging people in science?
Well, Cosmos, the brainchild of Andrienne and Carl Sagan, who were married at the time and still on the show, it's all about communicating the beauty and splendor of science. It's all about showing how it works every day in connection with our lives. And especially with regards to Earth Day, the series this season, we call it season 3. It's the first one was with Carl Sagan in '84, and the second one was in 2015. But this series shows stories of scientists who went against all the odds, basically risked lives and worse reputations and things to make the world a better place to live in. So the series tracks these discoveries that have changed the way we lived. And in episode 12, they pose the question saying that we have two directions that we can go. We can go with the science-based direction and save the planet, or we can continue doing the capital, they don't use that word, but the capitalism approach to it where it's all about consumerism and waste and things like that. And then episode 13, the finale episode, ponders that we made the right choice. And so it's very timely. It's very positive. It's full of hope and really great information. And it was just such a joy and a dream come true for me to actually get the job and work on it.
And I know we're going to have fun today with you sharing some clips, but do you want to just tell us a little bit about how you got connected to this 18-month journey and why it's so personal for you from some of your young aspirations you had?
Well, I saw the '84 series and it changed my life. And at that point I said, there's nothing cooler than being a scientist. Mind you, in '77, I saw Star Wars. And I was always interested in space travel and used to hang out at JPL when they were located in Santa Monica and get all the cool press releases. So when I saw the '84 program, it just was so inspiring to me that I decided that I had to become an astronaut. So I went to become an astronaut and failed at that because of these. And it's also, I like to point out that I got a D- in physics in high school and bribed the teacher to raise it from an F to a D- with a weather station. And Mr. Mulvihill and was my teacher. But it ingrained a love of science and physics in me, and all the visual effects that I do, they're always my go-to places, physics first and then science. And then I got called up by somebody, a friend of mine, who said that they're making a new Cosmos. And I said, I got to get involved in it. And I called up the visual effects producer and they put me on the list. And then a lot of things happened. And then my old coordinator, Jack Geist, who's now a very successful visual effects producer, raised under Tom Bolin and myself, Jack became the producer. So he called me up and he goes, you don't really want to do this because there's absolutely no money for the effects and there's no money for you in it. And it was like, no, just get me in the room. Just get me in the room. So I went in for the interview and it was the most amazing thing. The room is 2 white walls, 2 glass walls. And there was writing over every inch of every one of those surfaces. And in the room was Andrienne, the producer, writer, director of this show, Brannon Braga, whose fame comes from writing and directing tons of Star Treks and now the Orville, and Andre Bormanis, our scientist that I touch base with every day on everything, and then a couple other people. And I just could not sit still. I was bubbling so much that my enthusiasm, I think, bowled them over. And before I left the building, they'd offered me the job. And I took it and then negotiated the monies in it. And it's not about money. At some point, it's about, this is a dream come true. I'm going to get to interface with all these scientists and get to really dig into the bottom questions. Like when Neil deGrasse Tyson showed up on a tour of the facility that we'd set up, the first question is, so explain to me how quantum physics, the mere act of observing something changes it completely. It sounds like BS to me. And we went into a very in-depth discussion, and you have to know that Neil is the same person off screen as he is on screen. So it was really a lecture, and it was a good lecture. And then, you know, from there, more and more scientists, more and more fun. That's all I could say.
Yeah, let's talk just a little more about that, then we'll start some show and tell. So you've talked about how exciting it was to collaborate with scientists, but also, you know, some challenges given that scientific advances are so dynamic and how that impacts what you're kind of putting on the screen. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Well, yeah, we had our mantra was science first and beauty second. And later I found out, as I was deep diving into it, that science is intensely beautiful. The things that are there when you actually learn to see them are jaw-dropping. So the inspiration for all the shots became, you know, very easy by digging into some of the research. But, you know, Anne and Brandon wrote these 13 scripts, and then when you read the 13 scripts, especially given the budget that we had, you just go, there's absolutely no way we're going to be able to pull any of this off. And then when you get into it and you take it, you know, shot by shot or story by story, it's about digging into what they say, getting to go to the science people and getting to have some really in-depth discussions. And then we storyboard things out and meet with the science people again, and they would correct me, and, you know, what an education. Then we'd do animatics on it most of the time, and then we'd start to execute it. So all, you know, was very well researched and approved and so on and so forth. But when we got to quantum physics, and actually when we got to black holes, which is in the first episode, by the time we finished a number of rounds at the shot in quantum physics, we started from scratch 7 different times on one shot. When I finally got it right and it was going to be approved was number 5, and then the science changed. New theories came out that made more sense and were more likely to be correct. So we had to throw it away and start over completely. And in terms of black holes, I made a black hole. My vendors, I had 15 vendors around the world. Our main vendor was Booth in Paris and UPP in Prague, and Scanline in Vancouver. And then we had a ton of other people. And, you know, I told the Booth guys what it is I wanted, and they gave me the standard black hole, and I'd seen an image somewhere and said, no, we got to do this and this. And the cool thing about it is it's a light distorting gravity well. So, like, you know, let's put something interesting behind it. And then we brought on to the show Carl Walter Lindenlaub, our DP, who I'd done Stargate with. And Walter, like, kicked everything up 35 steps because of the way he lit and the way he moved the camera, which flowed backwards and made a lot of shots that we had previs have to be reconceived to fill with the flow of the show. So the point of that is that, so we did this thing with the black hole, and we, because of Walter's camera moves, I decided that what would be cool, and nobody's ever done it before, is let's fly by a black hole. Let's, like, go past it and not get sucked into it. You've seen, you know, the funnel shaped thing with the light disc around it and the camera, here's the black hole, and the camera goes like that and then it goes down. Well, with this new idea of black holes that we were reading about, it was like all distortion, and you could fly by as long as you stayed away from the event horizon, which is the point where you get sucked in. So our thing is we had a double black hole. And when we started it, it was a theory. And by the time we finished it, it was a fact. And NASA put out an animation that they made of what they suspect that this looks like, which oddly enough matched what I had already done but theirs was a different color. So we debated for weeks about, should we change our color to match theirs or stay with the colors we did? So the science is always a moving target. That's not to say that there's a fact and a fact changes. When science words are very specifically chosen, there aren't facts until they're facts. You know, there's theories, there's most likelies, but a fact's a fact. So, you know, black holes, the fact is they exist. The theory is this is what they look like. We photographed one. Didn't look like the cool simulations, but it's because they photographed it in radio waves instead of light waves. I go on too long about this, but that's the gist.
Well, I think, why don't we jump into some show and tell? Because you have a lot of great clips where you can talk about the tools and the techniques and the challenges. Where do you want to start?
Well, I want to start at the beginning because it sets up the premise of the ship of the imagination and the whole future. And, you know, the effects on the show, I have to set it up slowly. It's a science show. It's a science documentary. It is not an entertainment piece. Anne and Brandon make it look like an entertainment piece. But the science, to really get it, you know, it's slow. And a lot of the shots that we put together, and the majority of the shots we put together, were anywhere from, you know, 30 seconds to 11 and a half minutes long, because that's what it took to not pretend we're doing sleight of hand, but to actually show it. So things take a long time to get to the point because there's so much information going through it. So when and if this thing, you know, gets entered for any awards and you got to do one of those snazzy clip reels, there isn't no way to do a snazzy clip reel on this show and see the culmination of what the shot is. So with that said, I'm going to play for you the opening sequence of the show. Hopefully it'll play. I'm going to share my screen now and hit play.
Science can carry us across that vastness, but without imagination, we go nowhere. Our ship of the imagination is propelled by twin engines of skepticism and wonder. It's guided by the simple set of rules that define science and make it so powerful. Test ideas by experiment and observation. Build on those ideas that pass the test. Reject the ones that fail. Follow the evidence wherever it leads and question everything. Come with Our ship of the imagination can take us anywhere in space and time. The cosmos is right outside our front window. If you want to see the past, look down. And if you want to see the future, look up. On this voyage, we're bound for a distant galaxy. And we'll discover how we as a species became explorers of the cosmos.
So that's the opening, sets up the ship, and it sets up a good encyclopedia of the kind of visual effects we did, from naturalistic things to space stuff to a little idealized stuff.
I'm going to toss in a question as we're queuing up the next one. We have a question from your friend, David Tanaka, joining us, who says, Hey, Jeff, has there ever been an incident in which creating the requested visual effect shot or sequence actually influenced the evolving scientific findings?
Wow, that's a great question, David. I can't say that. Well, no, I can't. No, the creation of the shot doesn't infect it. The conversations with the scientists do. There's this awesome thing. I'll find the photo on my phone. There's an awesome thing, and I'll hold it up and you'll be able to see it. One of the sequences has to do with sending spaceships to Beta Centauri, which we believe has an Earth-like planet and close enough that we might actually get to go there. So this company, funded by a Russian oligarch, oddly enough, what it is that the spaceship, which I actually got to hold in my hand, and well, here's the spaceship. I put it on a $5 bill so you could see how big it is. So this spaceship has everything on it that the Voyager spacecraft had on it: X-ray measures, photogrammetry, cameras, radio, infrared, on and on and on it goes. So they're building 1,000 of these. They're putting them in light sails, and they're going to launch the light sails. This is a real thing that's happening into space. We've already tested the first light sail successfully. And then they're building an array down in South America in the desert that'll have a 1.5 mile circle of lasers. And they hit these sails with the lasers, and it propels them up to a minimum of 20% the speed of light. So it'll take them 20 years to get there, photograph the place, and 5 years for the transmission to come back. The reason there's 1,000 of them is a lot of them aren't going to make it because there's debris and things in space. So they're sending a lot of them there. So I was meeting with the scientists and talking about how we're going to do it and what to show and what the array may be laid out like and so on and so forth. And at the end of the meeting, they said, well, we only have one problem, is that the radio signals will take too long to deal with it, with things, and we haven't come up with a problem. And as any visual effects person knows, when you're working with external hard drives, you daisy chain them together, and you can have like 15 hard drives show up on your desktop with one cable plugged in. And I said to the guy, well, can't you daisy chain it with a light ray? Use laser light and just do it. And he hooked that up to the thing, and they went away, and he called me back and he goes, your idea is going to work. So that happened, David. I'm pretty excited about that. I thought it was a lame idea, but it was hard enough for us to keep up with the science. And we did get some stunning compliments. We do a sequence that I hope to show you a little later about hunters, sinkers, and floaters, which is the first time anybody thought about what other life forms might be like that are real instead of monsters. And Carl Sagan and his partner did it on the planet Jupiter and blah, blah, blah. We get into that whole thing. They saw that, and they were in tears on how beautiful we realized what they had. So that was gratifying. We did another episode on the life and death of Cassini, which was a person and a spaceship. And the head of the Cassini mission, head of imaging in the Cassini mission, came up to me and after she'd seen it and told me that I nailed it and captured it, and that I've advanced based on the images that Cassini got. I advanced their understanding a little bit, and that she wanted to use all of our stuff and take it in to JPL and do that. So that was, I had a few high points, and those are some of them, but I can't really say we influenced the science.
Early on you were mentioning, you were talking about quantum physics, and I know you have a great clip from the clock tower. Do you want to show that and talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm showing it mostly because it's my favorite. Okay, it deals with quantum physics, but
in a universe devoid of free will, are we nothing more than deterministic robots? We have found a way to hitch a ride on the uncertainties, to forge technologies that would otherwise be unattainable. We have built a quantum clock, one that you never have to wind. It will only lose a single second in the next 15 billion years. A three-dimensional lattice of laser light keeps isolated atoms of the element strontium suspended in space. For all we know, we may be mere collections of pre-programmed particles in a deterministic universe.
So that's a little bit on quantum physics. We also dealt with entangled particles and things like that. And, you know, the whole quantum physics actually hurt my brain. You could feel the neural pathways growing as you talk to quantum physicists. And I said to them, I had three of them, because it's really hard to understand. It's like we also deal with the double slit experiment and talk a lot about photons and how a photon, you know, a beam of light is a wave or is it a particle? If it's a particle, it's a photon, it's a wave, and then it's like a sound wave and it does weird stuff. When you put the light through the double slit experiment and you don't observe it, it's a particle. When you observe it, it's magically waves. And so, like I mentioned earlier, I talked to Neil about this, it went on forever and ever. They don't mean observed by see it with your eyes, they mean observed by measuring it. I don't get into any deeper than that, but the quantum physicists would explain it to me and I'd tell you, and I said to them, this sounds like, you know, I could be a quantum physicist, this is it. When I think this thought, that light somewhere in the world goes on as a direct result of my thought because I'm entangled with it. And the guy goes, well, no, that's not it at all. And I go, but it is it. It's measure, don't measure. Exists, it doesn't exist. You know, quantum computers, we got them now, but you need something called the comb in order to translate what the quantum computer does. Quantum clocks we have now, but you need this translator device. So it's like, it's all theory until somebody can prove something. And the theory sounds so outrageous that I just ended up having so much fun with the scientists because I kept coming up with my own quantum theories of things, you know, parallel brains, parallel tracks of the universe, you know, so on and so forth, and how they interangle, you know, and what a doorway actually is, and so on and so forth. They have a great sense of humor, but in the end, they really proved to me how little I don't know, how little I know. It was great fun. But quantum physics, the clock tower, the reason I picked it is because the script doesn't say we do that. The script says we go through the face of a clock tower and we get to a strontium atom to see the clock. And Anne and Brandon were just so great to work with because I could have these crazy ideas like that and show it to them and they would run with it. And, you know, it happened time and time again. There's one show where I've had more creative freedom than any other show, oddly restricted by science, which again, I'm not to belabor the point. I thought the science was going to be a limiter because science, according to my high school, comes in these white and black pages and they're very boring and the diagrams are very, you know, cartoony and this. But like I said, when you start dealing with them and they start turning some of their research over to you and you can have back and forth, man, it's greatest thing ever, science.
I mean, do you have any hopes in terms of how you think the content, the stories, the information that came through in this episode, you know, this has been 13 hours of content, how that influences or impacts, you know, where do you hope that it goes in terms of making an impact?
Well, here's the problem. So Cosmos is funded by three groups: National Geographic, Fox, and why can't I remember his name? The guy that Seth MacFarlane, who is oddly a huge science nut. So according to contract, National Geographic, I believe, had the rights to air it first. So they aired it in 172 countries simultaneously on Monday nights. The last one was this week. And sadly, Fox owns the streaming rights and refused to let them stream it. So nobody actually got to see the show. I mean, it did respectable, but it's not. Fox's plan was to air the series opposite the Summer Olympics, which we aren't having now. So we're hoping they're going to air it because they don't have any sports. We're hoping they're going to air it soon. Once it's aired and a lot of people have a chance to see it, it's a life-changing experience, not in the way that it's like, you've been bad and you must now use this kind of thing. In the way that it enlightens and enhances your understanding of the world, and you'll never look at a star again the same way. Each of these stories, like we tell the story of Vavilov, who was a botanist in Russia during World War II, who, thanks to what he did, we have food in the world today. There's a seed bank up in Norway, I believe it is, that is in danger now because of global warming. It's up there to store the seeds. They have, I forget, 250,000 different species of food seeds up there. You know, so we go through his story and you hear the tragic end, but you walk away with it entertained and informed about food. We deal with another story about a soldier in World War, a poor soldier from one of the Eastern Bloc countries in World War I, who wrote a book on how to get to the moon and back, and nobody wanted it, so he published it himself. Was not a big hit. Jump ahead to the 60s, NASA's doing the Apollo mission to get us to the moon. They can't figure it out. They can't figure out how to land a guy on the moon and get him back safely, or a girl, a human on the moon. And somebody found this book, and they brought it in, and this book specifically details what they did. And this you know, happens time and time again, where science has done something, and we cover, you know, Cassini and Huygens and Spinoza. We cover, you know, a lot of people, and it's all about, they all were nuts to the people around them, especially the church, but they all did it and defied the odds, and they made theories and they did things. Newton was trying to figure out what the nature of light is by sticking needles in his eyes. I mean, half the show, well, not half the show, almost half the show is animation, cartoon-like animation. The rest of it's live action visual effects. So, you know, we have a chance to show all these things. We also get into the nature of what it means to be a human by way of talking about how we expand it. And I don't know, I never thought about it, but there was actually, you know, what they believe is a tribe in the Polynesian islands who just said it's too crowded or dangerous or whatever. And people made boats and put supplies in them and headed off. And then think back that they didn't know and there was anything out there. For all they knew, the world was flat or on the back of a tortoise, or, you know, there are monsters anyway. And they went and they found new places. And, you know, think about that. That's crazy. Do we have that kind of courage today to venture into the unknown for the benefit of everybody? So it's a very inspiring series. And, you know, episode 12 is a little down because it shows you, we talk a lot about what's going on in the world today. It turns out two scientists in 1967 published a paper that predicted what's going on today. And it got widespread reading, but it got shut down by oil companies and manufacturing companies, so on and so forth. But they predicted it based on the initial question the one scientist asked is, how does the planet keep an average mean temperature? And that led him into hydrocarbons and greenhouse effect. And then based on that, he did this prediction, he and his partner. So episode 12 has a lot to do with that and shows you what's going to happen if we don't do something. And I was on a Deadline panel with Ann and Neil deGrasse Tyson the other day, and Ann kind of summed it up by saying that, you know, with this virus shut down, Neil pointed out, we're 1/4 of the way set out by the convention, the French convention that, you know, America dropped out of, to saving the planet. You know, it's instant. It happened in a matter of weeks. And then Anne chimed in and said, what's important is for you, the viewer, is that if you don't want your children to live the way you're living right now, you'll think about things a little bit differently. And that's really all the series wants to do, is get you to think, that understand that there are facts and there are things that are real, and that you can make a difference, you know, and it's not about becoming a vegan or only using, you know, plastic or paper or cloth or whatever it is. There are lots of things all the way through this. And then episode 13 ends in very uplifting. You got to see those two together is what I'm saying.
Well, since you're touching on so much important stuff about the impact of this show, the circumstances our planet and humanity find ourselves in right now, and how this show is bridging history and fact and its hyper relevance to today, you want to throw into the piece on the seed bank and just talk a little bit about more of that sequence, which seems enormously relevant for right now?
All right, let me cue it up. 1 second. Oh, how much greater this is when you have a nice support team behind you. Okay, sharing now.
800,000 other human beings had starved to death in Leningrad, besieged by the German forces from September of 1941 until January of 1944. The city somehow still managed to hold out against the relentless assault. The meager rations of 2 slices of bread a day had run out long before, and the protectors of Vavilov's treasure began to succumb to hunger amidst the plenty that their sacred honor prevented them from consuming. The botanists perished from hunger, and yet not a grain of rice in the collection was unaccounted for. After Stalin's death and the recognition of the damage he and Lysenko had done to the Soviet Union, Nikolai Vavilov could once again be talked about in public. And this is here because of his life and work. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault is buried deep beneath the earth at the top of the world. It can hold 4.5 million kinds of seeds underground. So why didn't the botanists at the Institute eat a single grain of rice? Why didn't they distribute the seeds and nuts and potatoes to the people of Leningrad, who were dying of starvation every day for more than 2 years? Did you eat today? If the answer is yes, then you probably ate something that descended from the seeds that the botanists died to protect. They gave their lives for us. If only our future was as real and precious to us as it was to them.
So I should say a few things about that. First off, I went in and edited all the clips you're seeing a little bit so that they weren't 40 minutes long. So sometimes the story's not clear. But, you know, we didn't have a large budget. And talking about visual effects for a minute, we sent a student crew that I found in Norway to shoot that building. Unfortunately, it was under construction, and there was no snow because of global warming. It's starting to become a risky proposition. And Neil, of course, was shot, you know, green screen, and then we had to throw all that together to make it look, but it's a real thing. And that's the premise of the show, is none of the visual effects are used to do anything other than the real thing. So it's the Vivalas story, Nicola Vivalas story is, he mentions, Neil mentions Nychenko, I believe his name is, who was Vivalas' arch enemy and went to Stalin and told Stalin that only he could discover how to grow vegetables in the snow by soaking peas in ice water. And he waged a campaign against Niccolo and got the guy thrown in prison. And the way they decided to execute him, he was supposed to be shot. They decided not to. They starved him to death on purpose. And so Niccolo died before the truth came out that the other guy actually caused so much damage and so much death in Stalingrad because of his idiotic, non-scientific approach to that. So that's one of the more somber stories. And you could see some fine stop frame animation done by this company. They were great. We went in and erased seams, but these guys, they were fantastic.
You just set me up for a good question, which is people would love for you to talk a little bit more about your process for supervising work of so many vendors. I think you said 15 around the globe on a project of this scope. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Well, yes. We hired each vendor based on what they're good at, like everybody. We cast them. And then secondary, Booth did last season, so they had a lot of assets, so they were a no-brainer. And UPP in Prague was just amazing. So what I would do, it was an interesting process to me. You read the script, you freak out. You go and talk to Ann and Brannon and see what it is they have in their heads that didn't make it on the page. Then we had hired a storyboard artist, so my storyboard artist would draw up my ideas based on the script. And, you know, a lot of storyboard artists are so good that they don't need my ideas, they have their own ideas. And so I'm always eager with the storyboard artists to see what they come up with, because the way I look at it is, a visual effects shot is not about me. It's not my ego and everything. It's about getting the best thing out there, the most cost-effective and wonderful way. And so I don't care whose idea it is or where it comes from. And that goes through all the facilities. When I would turn over requests, you know, shots for them to do, I would tell them, you know, here's our temp that Neil Greenberg, my visual effects editor, you know, put together for you. Here's the reference material. This is what the script says. This is my storyboards on it. Here's my previs on it. But if you have a better idea, do mine and then do yours. And the people at Booth, people at UPP, at Scanline, at Crafty Apes and Otamo and Finn down in Australia, all of the vendors, Shade Tree, all of the vendors got excited, to be working on Cosmos, but they were all coming up with ideas. So my job became more of an idea mitigator, you know, take a little of this, take a little of that. So it became an iterative process, and we knew that going in. So when it comes time to present, it's always a joy for me to be able to say, oh, you know, Bill over at Scanline came up with this shot, and I think it's really great. Why don't you have a look at it? Here's what we asked for. Here's what he did, you know, and pass the credit around. So we found that, backtracking a little, we found that doing storyboards was taking too long. We had 13 hours to do, and we didn't have a lot of time, and we didn't have a long schedule. Most of our schedule was in pre-production, oddly enough. And so I had to start drawing my own sketches. And if any of you have ever seen my drawings, they leave a bit to be desired, but they get the ideas across. I would show them to Brandon, and he would just go, what am I looking at? And I'd have to go, well, don't you see this camera? And there's the, you know, and he'd go, I don't see that at all. And you show it to the editor and go, what do you see? They'd see it. So anyway, it became a thing, but my storyboards only led us astray once. And then we had two different previous companies working off of the storyboards, one in Montreal and another one in Los Angeles, Ron Frankel's company, and I'll be ridiculed later for not remembering the guy in Montreal, but they did great work. And then sitting down with my visual effects editor, Neil Greenberg, who is, you know, could be a visual effects supervisor on his own. He's a genius, you know, he's from Texas, so everything comes with a Texas twang. you know, and it's all give and take, because he'll put together the shot the way I asked for it, and he'll go, well, this looks like a donkey's butt, you know. And then he would show me what he did, and so on and so forth. So to be a good supervisor is to surround yourself by smarter people, more capable people than yourself, and be able to have the tools, the internal tools to be able to sort through it and mitigate it. Once we got it nailed down, which usually happened pretty fast. A lot of my ideas did make it in, by the way. I wasn't a complete pass-alonger. But then it was the vendor, the facility doing it. And like I said, they do their version and my version. And then we talk about it and combine it. And then the presentation of the shots was always horrific for me. Because as you know, on a movie, you show it to the director and maybe the producer will show up, but the producer knows not to say anything unless the director is weak. So you just got to get it by one person. On Cosmos, scientists, all the scientists, relevant scientists would be there. The show producers, our in-house science advisor, and Ann and Brannon would be in the room. And, you know, it's like, to get a shot through was, I think one day I scratched my hand bloody, because all those people and everybody has an idea. You know, everybody's got an idea. Once they see it and it's like, you know, your first or second iteration of it is close to done, everybody's got an idea. And I immediately shut down and say no to everybody. And then I had to learn to open up, because these are scientists and they know better than I do. And so that became, towards the end, it got to be fun for me. But at the beginning, I was just like, we'll never get a shot through. I think one shot we did 101 iterations of, and what it was is showing a time lapse of New York on the left-hand side of the screen from primordial Earth days to today. And on this side of the screen was to show the evolution of the brain. And we would get New York right and everyone would be pleased, and then they hate the brain. So then we get the brain right, and then everyone would love it, and then they hated New York. And then, you know, it was very stressful, to put it mildly. But at the end of the day, you know, we'd go into the editors, which were Eric Sears and John Duffy, who were doing most of the editing. And we bemoan, you know, lots of bemoanment sessions. And then I'd watch them edit and get very upset that they were cutting out stuff that were important to the shot and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, again, they both became very good friends and we were able to have an open dialogue. And I learned that as a scientist, you have to advocate for your point of view. And that became a key tool, unlike on a feature where you're advocating for the director's point of view. You know, my point of view had evolved with the creation of the shots, and everybody had been brought along piecemeal, and bringing them all together at one time, as I said, became a very stressful thing. So that was the process. Then, oddly enough, we got to color timing, and I color timed the show with Walter Lindenlaub because nobody else was available to do the color timing, you know, and it was, we found things in the color timing that could have been better. And we found sound things, you know, and so on and so forth. We were kind of became the QC people at that point. And because we were working so closely with color timers, if we could get a shot turned around and dropped in that was slightly different, you know, we got permission to do that time and again, not for color reasons, but for story reasons, which made it an even better thing. So, you know, in summation, it was a challenging project, which made it very exciting and also made the end result something that, you know, we're all really, really proud of. And people that have seen it, we've gotten a lot of positive feedback from them about the message and the stories and how fascinating it is to see and learn some of these things that just isn't taught.
Thank you. Let me toss you a couple questions. These two are sort of in the same vein. Question one, how many shots total in the whole project? And was there a shot average cost you can share with us? And then the second question is, from the script to the final shot, what was the average kind of timeline, you know, of the revisions and timeline for the VFX per show?
Okay, good questions. There are only 1,700 shots in the show, which is not a lot of shots for 13 hours. But they add up to over 6 hours of shots, because as I previously mentioned, some of them are 11 minutes long. So the shot count is misleading. There is no average shot cost per se. I can tell you that the budget, if I were allowed to disclose it, you'd be shocked at. And thank goodness that so many of our vendors were as excited as I am to work on the show, because they did shots at cost. And I would never let anybody lose money on me, having been the head of the VES. That's a no-no, you know, and frequently people would push the bar way further than I thought we could. They pushed it to feature level, and I'd have to get in touch with them and go, hey, did you lose money on this? Because if you did, we're going to find a way to make sure that you didn't. And so it ended up 15 companies and our in-house team led by Arthur Mesa putting together, you know, feature quality stuff at a documentary price. The average time, you have to understand that all the scripts were written before I got hired. I got hired in February of 2018. Yeah. And I was finished with the show February of 2019, because it was supposed to air in March of 2019. And so, but maybe what you really are asking me is, from the time we got the signal to go, how long was it? And the average on that, our average time was 2 weeks per shot, some of them taking 6 weeks or 10 weeks. But the way they set up the post schedule is, from the day you start editing to the day you deliver the show was 8 weeks. And we had 2 editors, so they were cascading over it. We had 3 editors for a time, but ended up with just 2 editors. The 3rd editor had to go on to a feature because we extended past his date.
Got it. And then going back to when you were showing the clock tower sequence, we had a very specific question about what render engines were used.
Good ones. I don't try to get into the latest software and latest render. I know, you know, my P's and Q's, you know, but I would never dictate to a vendor what render engine to use. I usually dictate to them, you know, I got to have ray tracing, I got to have light reflection, I have to have global illumination, we have to be able to light this thing, you know, and that I always say to them, don't create the shot and present it to me finished. Involve me in your process, because I can save you a lot of grief. And one of the things I've learned to do over the years, is I call it the comb effect, not like the quantum physics comb effect, which is a completely different thing. It's a coarse comb. You know, when people used to have combs, there's fine combs and coarse combs. I would say, let's take the coarse comb effect. So do one version of the shot, you know, in rough, laid out, whatever, you know, at what you think is the minimum. Do one at what I ask, and do one way over the top that breaks it. And then you negotiate based on what you see there, and it gets you to where you're going a lot faster. Once we say, okay, this is the direction, it's a solid direction, so now you can hit the road running. So we try to do that with the previs. We try to do that with the post-vis shots that Neil Greenberg puts together, and try to make the entire process collaborative and fun. As Tom Bolin, and I always say, Tom is my normal producer, if we're not having fun, then we shouldn't be doing this. So we try to make this as much fun for everybody as that we have for ourselves. And I just say, because it's my chance to embarrass Tom, many of the day would be that I'd walk into his office and he'd have television cameras, Xeroxes of television cameras pasted on the wall, and a soundtrack, and I'd suddenly be on a talk show and he'd be the host. I mean, we had fun.
Well, let's go back to a few more clips. I don't know if you want to go to the flatworm. I know you have a great clip about the, with the ocean and the wheat growing, which, pose some challenges to bring to life.
Let's do the wheat. I think the wheat is more informative for everybody.
Great.
Let me cue the wheat up. That's good. And let me share the screen. That's the wheat. And let me hit play.
At 25 cosmic seconds to midnight, between 10 and 12,000 years ago, humans discovered another great power. Instead of foraging for food, we learned how to grow it in the earth. This changed everything. Our ancestors did something else they had never done before. They invented new tools, technology, to plant and pull food out of the earth. They settled down and moved indoors. Our relationship to nature and to one another would never be the same. This agricultural revolution, the domestication of plants and animals, is the mother of all revolutions because all others trace back to it. Its consequences reach far beyond even our own moment in time. Like most revolutions, this one brought change that was both great and horrifying. There was a new concept in the world: home. A specific place on the planet where your ancestors and you were born and lived. And over time, these settlements grew larger until about 20 cosmic seconds ago, or around 7,000 BCE. Welcome to Chateau Hoyok, a community on the Anatolian plain. It's about 9,000 years ago, and everyone has settled in for the evening. Tonight, roughly the same number of people who once populated all of Africa are living together in this proto-city. The city is such a new idea, they haven't invented the street yet, or the window. So the only way you can get into your apartment is to walk along the rooftops till you arrive at the opening to your dwelling. Chateau Hoyok lacked something much more significant than streets and windows. There is no palace here. The bitter price that the invention of agriculture cost human society had yet to be paid. Here, there was no dominance of the few over the many. There was no 1% attaining lavish wealth while most everyone else merely subsisted. Forensic analysis of the women, men, and children who lived here show a remarkable similarity in diet. They still cherished the hunter-gatherer ethos of sharing. Chateau Hoyok was egalitarian. The weakest ate the same food that the strongest did, and everyone lived in the same kind of home. But man, it was anything but drab. Come on, I'll show you.
So there's that.
Wow. Couldn't be more relevant for right now. I have another question for you from actually VES Germany. Did you use virtual production workflows, as Neil deGrasse Tyson is often surrounded by full CG environments? And if yes, did it help to stay in the tight budget, or was it more to help him act?
Well, that's a great question. I pleaded to use virtual environments, but we did not have the budget for it. So what that meant, and it shows what a great actor Neil is. I can't talk enough about that aspect of it. I would have to stand, first let me say that Neil's a real scientist. He's head of the Hayden Planetarium in New York. He has all of his stuff. He is genuinely fascinated. He is the person on screen. He's the same person off screen. And woe be you if you ask him a question he can't answer right away, because the answer will take 5 days, and he'll grab you by the shoulder over and over again to fill you in on the latest research, and it goes on and on and on. He's a lovely guy, but you know, you saw he's mostly in green nothings all the time. We shot for 3 months in Santa Fe at the Santa Fe studios in these green voids. And then we spent 6 weeks traveling Europe, where we would shoot one day, travel the next day, scout the next day, shoot the next day, and so on and so forth, so that we got a lot of locations. We also had a group of camera guys that we sent on the craziest trip ever, a cameraman and a producer. They would like be in Russia on Monday shooting in Moscow in Red Square. On Tuesday, they would be in the south end of India. On Wednesday, they'd be up in Norway. You know, they just had like 10 days. They ended up in Texas, and they shot, you know, all of our plates for us. But the trust that Neil placed in me, which was fantastic. So we had a weird thing. So I'd have to, with Carl Walter Lindenlaub, the DP, and Brandon, and I would huddle with Neil, and we'd talk about, okay, this is the color light, this is the directions coming on, there's going to be a big planet here, blah, 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 this and that and there. And then, you know, ultimately I'd have to go, and over there, Neil, the entire universe is going to explode. And we'll give you a light cue when that happens. But Neil acted in those green voids. He showed up every day, 2 hours before call. He reviewed the scripts with Ann and Brandon, and then he did those performances all day long, never getting tired, never seeing his pitch slow, never having to stop for Neil. And when you see that stuff, you see that he's selling the visual effects really well. And one of the humorous things that happened is that all the time is that I'd be back by the monitors with DP and Brandon and Ann, you know, and Brandon would go show Neil where to look, you know. So I already had a markup, so I go up and I go, so Neil, you know, you need to look at that mark. That's going to be, you know, the butterfly or whatever. And then I'd come back, and Walter would shout out, Neil, you're looking in the wrong spot. You need to look over here. You know, look over there, you know. And it got to be such a regular thing that I would just walk out to Neil and I would say, I am waving my hands randomly. Don't pay any attention to me. Walter's going to tell you where to look, and we'll just pretend I just told you. And then I'd walk back to camera, and Neil would look somewhere, and Walter would go, no, you knew. And it happened all the time. Neil and I had a good laugh about that whole thing. But it's you know what happens to your head after 3 months in a green void. That's all I could say. And Neil, it was exquisite. And Walter and his team, his lighting team, they were amazing. He had a color board operator, and we had all LED lights. And so that if I was wrong and I go, no, it needs to be more purple, it would happen instantly. So we got a good team together, almost like a virtual set. But had we had a virtual set, I'd tell you, given that nobody else on the crew had any experience with it, it would have got us off to a super slow start. And then we probably would have picked up speed halfway through it. On Geostorm, we had that, and it proved to be a never-ending source of arguments between the production designer and the director about, you know, we'd end up redesigning the set on the fly. Literally, we'd have a CAD guy sitting right there where that amplifier is, and I'd go, move the door 20 feet left on that wall. You know, the windows are too high, lower them. You know, we had to do all this stuff. So I'm a huge fan of it, but it takes, I think in pre-production, when you're going to go with virtual pipeline stuff, you need to bring people up to speed and give them time to play with it. So when you step on that set, man, you're close to a well-oiled group as you can be.
Thank you. So let's go a few more minutes because we still have everyone's loving this. You mentioned that you have the Floaters and Sinkers piece, which is a tribute to Carl Sagan, about kind of bringing his vision to life. That would be a great one for you to key up.
All right. It is going to start now.
The atmosphere is turbulent, and deep down, it's very hot. An organism must be careful that it's not carried downward to the hell below. also be the floater, a vast hydrogen blimp pumping helium and heavier gases out of your interior and retaining only the lightest gas, hydrogen. Sagan and saltpeter reasoned that like a hot air balloon, you'd stay buoyant by keeping your interior warm using energy acquired from the food you eat. A floater must eat organic molecules or make its own food from sunlight and air, as plants do on Earth. Floaters would be immense, several kilometers across, beings the size of cities. The floaters may propel themselves through the planetary atmosphere with gusts of gas, like a ramjet or rocket. Sagan and saltpeter imagined them arranged in great lazy herds for as far as the eye could see. Hunters are fast, maneuverable. Hunters eat the floaters.
So that was heavily edited, but that's the gist of it.
Got it. We just have a couple more questions, and then I'll let you see if you want to have dealer's choice for a final clip. Question, in what resolution is the show distributed, and in what resolution did you need to render?
We were in 4K, and what's very peculiar, once again, is National Geographic broadcasts in 4K, Fox does it in 720p. So the bulk of people who are going to see it are going to see a very less than HD version, so it's very upsetting.
All right, I'm going to let you play a dealer's choice, and if you want to have a clip to take us out on, I know you had a few other ones that were queued up.
Flatworm, Pavilion of Possible Worlds. I do Pavilion of Possible Worlds, even though it's not the greatest clip. The reason I'm doing it is there's some behind the scenes footage. Wrong one, sorry. I didn't mean the Pavilion of Possible Worlds, I meant the Palace of Life. That's why I played it on that. And even that may not work. This is not the time for a breakdown. Okay, never mind that then. It's for whatever reason. So it comes down to either Enceladus or flatworm. Dealer's choice, you choose.
Flatworm.
Flatworm. Okay. Flatworm, here we go. Is it playing? Oh no. Wait.
Not yet.
How about now?
Yep.
See that thing that looks like a shred of a ruffle from a gaudy dress? You might think it's kind of silly, but you would be so wrong. Long, long ago, some 600 million years ago, life first evolved something new to planet Earth, a command center that could perceive and react to its environment, a brain. Now, life inched closer to the stars. We think it first happened inside a flatworm, this little guy's ancestor, the first animal hunter. A brain was just what a hunter would need to seek out and plan a strategy for attack. Binocular vision allowed the flatworm to perceive the dimension of depth more sharply and objects with greater clarity, all the better to triangulate on prey. The flatworm brain had a pair of dense nerve clusters called ganglia. Cords extended from them, carrying instructions and sensations to the rest of its body. via some 8,000 neurons. Not many compared with the life forms that would come later, but a momentous beginning. Flatworms have something called auricles on the sides of their heads where their ears should be, but they're actually noses. We may not look much alike, but we have a lot in common. We share the same chemicals that control our nervous systems, called neurotransmitters. Flatworms can learn. They process information about their environment and act accordingly. A blueprint that remains state of the art 600 million years later. And they were the true pioneers in the deepest sense of that word. Unlike any life form before them, they developed the habit of venturing into the unknown territory in search of what they craved.
So that's the flatworm. Maybe not the most energetic clip to end on.
Are you good with ending on that one, or is there anything else you want to show before we?
Of course, I want to show other stuff.
I'll let you pick one more good one.
It's too bad we don't have a show of hands. I mean, it could be an Earth-based thing where we recreate a civilization that doesn't exist anymore, or we could do a trip to Enceladus, one of the moons of Saturn that has an ocean underneath. Or we could go with the spiritual Jeep commercial that's made up of a lot of visual effects, but it has Carl's voiceover on it. Oh boy, I know, just pick one. I'll pick this one. This is short. Again, these are all heavily edited. Don't judge them for continuity.
We don't know how this pool, called the Great Bath, was used, but we do know that this city was planned and laid out while the Greeks wandered in small tribes, just a band of itinerant merchants. Wait, do you hear that? Listen. Yes, the Indus Valley people of nearly 5,000 years ago installed modern plumbing in their homes, something most people didn't have until the late 20th century. And they mastered other forms of hydroengineering, underground pipes, sewage management, kitchens with running water.
So there you go.
Well, simply stellar work, and thank you so much, Jeff, for joining us today on behalf of the VES, and personally as someone who grew up camped out at the Hayden Planetarium for many years. So, and I also wanted to thank everyone who tuned in today for our special edition of VFX Pro's Home Edition, inside the VFX of National Geographic's Cosmos Possible Worlds. We will have the replay of this fantastic conversation up on the VES website and on our social media channels that you see on the screen soon. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, make plans to meet us right back here on May 4th at 11 a.m. Pacific for a special Star Wars Day live webcast with Dennis Murin, VES ASC, legendary visual effects artist and supervisor, and creative director at Industrial Light and Magic, who's worked on nearly all of the Star Wars films. So grab your lightsaber, sign up, and may the 4th be with you. So thank you so much, Jeff. Stay safe and well, everybody.
I want to thank everybody too, and if anybody has questions, my email is jeffokun@aol.com. That's the public one. Feel free to write me, no spaces.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. That's a wrap.
Thanks. Bye.